Hey everybody who is waiting. We jumped in a few minutes early and wanted to see if it would let us in, and it did. Maybe. It is not posting the video yet. So we'll see. Oh my. Yep, it's letting us go. So hey everybody, welcome. I am Kari the Mortician. We are here today. I'm so excited about our guest with Michelle Johnston from down in Texas, Texas girl. And I'm going to let you really just introduce yourself. She owns and runs East Texas Mortuary Service. And I'm going to let you give kind of a little backstory to who you are and start in the business and stuff. And then we'll dive into my menagerie of questions for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on here with you guys. So I am Michelle Johnston, and I started East Texas Mortuary Service in Tyler, Texas in 2019. And for those of you who maybe aren't in Texas and maybe don't know the differences in the licenses, in Texas, you can be what's called a commercial embalming establishment. And so that means you don't work for the public. We strictly work for other funeral homes, for judges, for medical examiners, doing removals, embalmings. I own my own crematory here, so we can do the cremations as well as, transportation. So that's what East Texas Mortuary Service is.
But you're not are you a funeral home?
I also have a funeral home. But no, East Texas Mortuary Service is just a commercial embalming establishment. That's the license here. So that's what we do. And so that means our back end is we're really the third party for all the funeral homes in the area. Like I said, as well as the judges and the medical examiners, running the accident calls and embalming the cases. Some of the funeral homes have a stress and casket for their funeral homes as well. Others don't. We just embalm, delivered to the funeral home, and the funeral home does the front of the house where they're waiting on the family and taking out the funerals, and we're doing the back end of the removal and the embalmings and cremations. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So we've been doing that since 2019. We've grown from about 300 calls to over 1,500 calls just in that short amount of time. So it's really been great. And then last year in 2023 is when I set out to try to open up Jerry, which is Johnston Embalming and Reconstructive Institute. And so we kind of succeeded in getting that approved in Texas and opening that up. And so we kind of run that right out of the same building here at the Mortuary Service. And it's been awesome. So we're really enjoying it.
You're a powerhouse of a lady. I love it. And I think Jerry is when you first started, I think promoting a lot, and you had the East Texas kind of go in and they would post on Facebook. But when Jerry started was when you really started promoting, and I was like, who is she? This is amazing. And I am getting over laryngitis, so
oh goodness.
I'm gonna be a hacking fool. Hold on.
You're okay. It's okay. Catch your breath.
You're killing me over here. What people don't realize about funeral directors, or especially embalmers, when we go to mortuary school, we don't work on restorative art in depth.
Right.
We're not getting a lot of damaged bodies to work on. And there's very few opportunity in the business to get to try those skills.
Right.
Vernie Fountain was one that his academy existed and was kind of the only one for a long time. Yeah. Matt Smith started a little one. John T. Hill now is doing some hands-on and things. Monica does a little bit. But this is really, I don't want to say revolutionary, but it is a start to a new amazing maybe trend that more will start. I'm sure you're hoping not a lot because you want everybody to come to yours. But what do you think this has, talk about the importance of this truly in the big picture?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, no, I don't don't advise against other people starting it. I think the more people that start something like this to be able to teach other professionals and students is phenomenal. Because the more we can get that out there and teach new people or even old people that have been doing this a long time that want to just learn new tricks, I think it's really important. So yeah, I think the value side of it is just, I do in my seminars, I always tell, kind of like my passion story and how I got started. And that's one of the main things that I say in that is just my motto. I have it painted all over my prep room, is that something is possible if you're willing to try. And so, what that means is that instead of unzipping the body bag and seeing some trauma and saying, oh, no, there's no way, we're just going to have to close the casket, put them on the table. Let's try something, right? Something is possible versus just saying no all the way around. And I think it's important too, in the sense of the industry as a whole, the profession as a whole, funeral industry, no matter where you're at, that cremation is a rising thing, right? Everybody talks about it. Cremation's a rising thing. And when you really sit back and think about it, it's like, well, have we, over the years, have we as professionals, have we made it where people even want to see their loved ones anymore? If we've constantly told family after family, no, sorry, he's not viewable, and or he was viewable and we didn't do the best job and we cut corners, right? And so that's kind of my biggest thing with it, is just showing people that something is possible. We can do better than what we've done all these years. And so, everybody's not going to be the Bernie Fountain. Bernie is a legend for all of us to learn from. I think he's the best thing that ever walked the earth. I'll never be as good as Bernie. Nobody will. But there's plenty of skills and things that you can learn and teach others, that maybe we might have a chance to turn this thing around at some point in time if plenty of us out there are teaching that. So that's kind of where I see the important side of it. And you'd be amazed when I really started advertising that I had gotten approved and it was, a legit thing at that point. You'd be surprised at how many people had messaged me from Facebook or something of that nature that knew me or maybe knew somebody around me that they experienced a death some point in their life. And they're like, I wish I would have known there were people like you out there, because the funeral home I went to didn't give us a chance to see her, or, whatever the case was. So people who weren't even in the industry that were just like, wow, we didn't even know people existed that could try something. We were never given an opportunity. We were just told no. And I think it's so important for even the public, even though I don't train the public how to do those things, I think it's important for the public to know there are people that do have extra set of skills that could do that. And there's no shame in saying, to your funeral director, okay, well, can we try? We're willing to pay somebody else to come in and help, It's just important if the public can also be, educated, that the answer doesn't have to always be no. Sometimes it has to be, and that's okay. But it doesn't always have to be. Sometimes it can be something. And so that's kind of where that's my biggest passion to it, is that we can do something if you're willing to try.
Well, and I think, it's a lovely idea that every embalmer would have the skills to be able to do this. But the logical truth is, think of someone who works in like a small town. You have 50 to 100 calls a year. You may get one who has some trauma to restore, and it may be minimal. It is not like every month, every funeral home is getting a smashed, deconstructed head from an accident that we have to do all this restoration in depth with wax work and things. And so if you don't have repetition, it's hard to build any skill. I mean, if I'm going golfing this next week, it's been 15 years. It's going to be a train wreck, but guess what? I'm going to give it my best shot.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to have any skills at it because I haven't done it in 15 years. Same thing with restoration. It's not the same thing at all. But that's the first thing that just popped in my mind. You need repetition and you need practice. And it's not like you can take a person who is completely whole and put together, smash them, then put them back together and the family not know when it's just a normal case that you're taking care of. So
Right.
it's definitely hard to get experience if you don't have repetition. So that's why it is good that there are people who are specialized you can bring in.
Mhm.
It is costly though,
Yep.
because it can take 30, 40, 50 hours to do some restorations if a family truly wants that long game end result for public viewing
Right.
and everything.
Absolutely. But that's kind of where I think the important side of it is too, is that communication with those people that, hey, something is possible here, and we're gonna
Yes.
we can bring somebody in that maybe can do these things. Let that person talk to the family, but just kind of understanding that's if you want it. And if you don't, that's okay. And there's some families that'll say, no, that's okay. It's not important to us. But there's plenty of families that, like I personally have worked with, that they would, I mean, they would spend anything that it cost them to see their baby one more time. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter. If once you've told them, yes, it's possible, the rest doesn't matter. And so I think it matters to just know that yeah, it's going to cost extra. Sure, we're going to have to bring somebody in that's specialized, but it's possible if it's important to you, versus
Right.
that funeral director who just from the jump says, no, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do, and doesn't give them an option of what's the other alternative.
So I'm Kari the Mortician. We're here with Michelle Johnston down in Texas. She owns and runs East Texas Mortuary Service. She's a trade embalmer, skilled at advanced restorative art. So we're just chatting today about her business and the industry. And I'm going to read you some questions, Michelle. What advice would you give your past self when starting out in this business?
Hmm. Um, Starting out, I guess would be not to be intimidated by those who maybe put you down or have you turn the other cheek because you're a female, or because you're too young, or because you're too small, or whatever the case is. um a lot of times we say, well, it's because we're women that happened, and in the beginning, a lot of the men didn't want women to be in the business, and I had a struggle even trying to find a job, because of being a woman. I was dual licensed at 19 years old, so I was young and I was a woman.
You're very
um
young.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I graduated college and had finished my apprenticeship at 19. So I was licensed
Wow.
at 19. So it was very difficult, right, to get a job in little old rural East Texas. Nobody, that wasn't heard of. But then I've also seen people, even men, but women as well, that they have a hard time and they get discouraged just because of their size.
Mm.
110 pound, girl or guy, that people are like, oh well, they can't lift, or and they get discouraged on that. And so I've seen people that didn't finish out mortuary school, or just kind of stopped looking for an apprenticeship because they got told no so many times that nobody was looking for an apprentice. So I think my biggest thing would have been to not get discouraged on that, um, and not let that have slowed me down, because even though I got done very young, it slowed me down a lot, just trying to overcome some of those obstacles and find places that were okay with the fact that I was young and that I was a female, getting
Mm.
started. So yeah.
We've got some questions about legality of embalming and things, and most all states are pretty the same. It's never a law that you have to be embalmed, but duration of time may dictate if you do need to be embalmed. Do you want to
Right.
talk about kind of what it is in Texas?
Yeah. So in Texas, you're not required to be embalmed. State law does not require you to be embalmed, but it does require refrigeration within 24 hours. And if refrigeration is not available, then embalming can take place, in lieu of that. But of course, we need embalming permission. The other thing in Texas is, if you have tried to contact the next of kin and haven't been able to get in contact with the next of kin after trying for a full 24 hours, then we can also legally embalm, if
Mm.
refrigeration is not available. So most places have refrigeration, or a place like mine that has refrigeration. So funeral homes would then bring the deceased to our place to use refrigeration units. So typically you don't see that people embalm in lieu of refrigeration. But the law in Texas is, must be refrigerated or embalmed within that 24-hour span. But embalming is not required for any type of viewing. No.
And how long does embalming take? Give us a general average.
2 hours, hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes to 2 hours, I think is a standard generalized, case to seed it. I would say about 2 hours.
Yeah, so there's so many variables. Guys, when you ask a question like that, like, are they autopsied? Are they not autopsied? How are their veins and arteries? Are we only going to have to raise one artery? Are we going to have to raise 10 of them? Do we have to inject 3 gallons of fluid or 8 gallons of fluid? So a lot is dependent on the size of the person, the condition of the vessels that are in there on the timing. It can be quick or it can be slow, but it's going to take as long as it takes. And that's like Michelle said earlier, cutting corners. You don't want someone who's going to go as fast as they possibly can. You're not going to get the end result that you need if you try to rush things. It's a process and it takes time. Can you do what? Okay. How long does it take the medical examiner's office to issue a report?
Same thing. It varies. We don't work directly with them on that side. I would say that here, typically, we see anytime it's going to be a ME report, we see it to be 6 weeks to 3 or 4 months sometimes. So not entirely sure. That just depends on the case and the situation that goes around it. But definitely, I would say typically around 4 to 6 weeks for preliminary reports, regardless.
Yeah, if they do, the medical examiner is the one who does the autopsy. I get questions a lot that, why do you take body parts out? We don't take any body parts out. We make an incision, we do our injection, we're taking out fluids and feces and urine, things like that are going to create more bacteria and decomposition. But when we are putting bodies back together after autopsy from the medical examiner's office, part of their study is toxicology, and the toxicology is what often takes a long time. Labs get backed up. It can take 12 weeks. I've had it take 6 months. That was during some COVID time, was kind of the worst, as it was for everything. But it can take a long time, which is frustrating to a lot of families. We get that too. We wish that we could speed it up. And then you'll get this report that's far more information than you've ever wanted to know, how much your loved one's liver weighed and what their, was in their digestive tract, all sorts of wild things there.
Yeah.
I'm just scrolling down some questions. Do you have aquamation, alkaline hydrolysis down there? Is it legal yet?
It's not legal in Texas. So no, as of right now, the law is not. Texas does not allow aquamation yet.
But you can take someone from Texas and go to like St. Louis or somewhere where it is legal and have them cremated and reduced by alkaline hydrolysis there. So you can cross state lines unembalmed to go to another state that has that, if that is acceptable by law with those states.
Right.
So a lot of you are asking about if you have to embalm. It is not a law that you have to embalm. So to be buried, you don't have to be embalmed. To have a viewing, you don't have to be, unless it is required by the funeral home that you are embalmed for a public viewing. And why we do that. Like, talk about why we do require that, Michelle.
So anytime you're going to do a public viewing, biggest thing embalming is for preservation and, of course, disinfection. So disinfection and preservation is the biggest reason for embalming. So anytime we're going to do any type of public viewing, just to be, cautious and safe for the public, as well as for the workers and the staff of the people who are dressing and casketing and moving this deceased around, we want to do embalming. And so you'll see, especially in most states, I know here in Texas, that embalming is not required to be done, but it might be a funeral home policy if they're going to have an open casket visitation. And so, one of the main things with that, though, on disinfection and preservation is we don't have any odors once we've done embalming, or at least we've cut down substantially on that. We don't have to worry about any types of gases or any types of purge, any type of bodily fluids that could be harmful, once again, to the visitors and or the staff that's there. And so it is an important thing to do if you're going to have a public visitation. I think it's highly important. Now, some of the funeral homes here in Texas, as it may be in other states, will allow maybe like a family private ID view, which is 15 to 20 minutes, 3 to 4 immediate family members, just to ID that person, to agree that that is their loved one, and then either have a closed casket or a direct burial or a cremation afterwards. And in those instances, most times the funeral homes won't require embalming, but that's because we're not allowing the public as a whole to come in. We're only allowing those few family members to see their loved one.
Someone's also asking if Muslims get embalmed. Typically, if someone is of the Islamic faith, they are not embalmed. There is nothing invasive done to them. They're hopefully buried by sundown. It is a very quick process, beautiful hands-on. I love when we get to care for someone who is Muslim, not because I'm wanting them to die, but when they do, I just love watching their practices because it's so hands-on and it's such a tight-knit, respectful community, which is, I just love it. I love getting to see different cultures and groups of people and how they care for their loved ones and grieve and mourn and go through the process. Is there laws around putting cremated remains of animals in with the person to be buried in Texas?
On animals, I'm not gonna quote that because I'm not entirely sure on that with animals. I know it is with other loved ones, other cremated human remains. That is not allowed in Texas.
What?
Animals, yeah.
No?
No, especially not going into a cemetery. So, like most cemeteries, they won't allow that. They won't allow 2 in 1. Y'all don't do that in your states?
We can put at minimum 2 people in a grave as long as one is cremated. And you can put people in the casket. You just may pay 2 openings and closings, even though they're
Okay.
really digging one grave.
Okay.
But we can there's some cemeteries that allow up to like 8 people on a grave as long as they're all cremated.
Yeah, but each one's got to have its own opening and closing, and it has to be documented that those people are there. So yes, that's how it is in Texas. So yes, it can be done.
Okay,
it's
I'm
not.
like, what?
Yes, so it can be done, but it can't be done in the sense of like we just put all of the grandmas in. Yeah, no, that's not allowed. Yeah.
Sneak
So
them
yes,
all
it
in.
can be done. Yes, it can be done, but it has to be documented. The cemetery has to know that these are the people that are buried there. And yes, some of them are going to require an open and closing of each one of those individuals.
Even though it's only one hole, but they collect their monies regardless, which we get. Talk about some of your most challenging restorative art, challenging processes or cases, if you can, by being general.
Yeah.
And can you also then talk a little about some of the things you've used for restoration that maybe people, plaster of Paris, screening, things that people maybe wouldn't realize we can use in the mortuary sciences?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just tell, like a few different stories. So like my biggest one, the one I always tell at my seminars and things that I teach is, I had a case when I was 21 that, there was an individual who was also 21 years old, and he went out for a jog that morning and he was hit by somebody who was texting and driving, and he was killed. And so I was, the funeral director. And so to me, this was my parents sitting across the table, right? Like, I'm 21 years old. And he wasn't married. He didn't have any kids. So he was really in the same boat that I was. But the coroner's office and the justice of the peace had told this family already that they didn't think he would be viewable, which that's a whole nother story for another day, right? We always hate that.
Yes.
We always hate that when police officers or medical examiners, or in our case, we have judges that stick their nose into stuff like that and say things like that to the family, because it's not fair. because you have no idea what we can do on the other side. And so putting that in their brains from the beginning, I just hate that. But that's what had happened here. And so they were convinced already. And I remember the dad and mom came in and they were so upset and distraught, of course. And he said, she just wants to see her baby boy. She just wants to see him again. And I was like, okay, whenever he gets back from autopsy, I'll take a look and I'll see if it's, if it's something, if we can do something. And anyways, he came back and I'll never forget that, like, I opened the body bag and my boss was with me. And instantly my boss was like, no, absolutely not. They've already been told that it's not viewable. That's going to be too much work. And we don't want to give the family false hope. And I was like, we can do something,
You're like, challenge accepted. Let's do this.
Let's do something. Anyways, just really got shut down about it. Like, no, absolutely not. Leave it alone. Let it be. Call the family. Tell them to close casket. And I just remember being so upset about that because he had been hit and there was crushed bones in his face. But like, I knew that we could do something. And it's funny because now I look back at that, 13 years ago and what I can do now, like my skills now. And I look back at that and I think, oh, man, if I had that case again, man, we could have rocked it, right? That case compared to what I can do now, that case would have been so easy.
Yeah.
But back then, it was still a pretty big task for us. Anyways, I went home that night. I was so upset that we weren't going to be able to have an opportunity. And I decided that I would lose my job if I had to, but I was going to go back to the office. And I went back to the office at night and I worked all night long. I never clocked in because I knew that I'd get fired for that. So I didn't clock in. I worked for free all night long. And I put this boy back together that he was identifiable, right? And used wax and just some other little things that we had in the prep room in the sense of, cosmetics and different types of web roll and rolling things. Because back then I didn't have plaster of Paris. I didn't have some of those things. So to get some of those bone structures back where they needed to be, we would roll up web roll or bulk cotton or something and plaster it in those edges. We would take clay and then go over it from the inside of the face to try to push those bones back out. I mean, we did so many things right back then before we knew some of the new things that we can use now. But anyways, I remember I got done at like 6:30 in the morning. I went home, I took a shower. I had to be back at work at 8. And so I haven't slept. And so I came back in at 8 and my boss was furious because they were like, I told you it was going to be a closed casket. And I'm like, look, I didn't clock in. I didn't, you know what I mean? I spent my own money with what we had. So I'm like, please just let me show them him. I mean, he's identifiable. And I'll never forget that my boss was like, well, don't be upset when they want to close the casket. And I'm like, hey, that's fine. But at least I'm giving this mama this is my mama sitting across the room, an opportunity to see him. And so finally the boss agreed. And so I was able to bring them in and I'll never forget them. I'm still in contact with them. Their name is the Cardoza family. And so all these years later, I get Christmas cards. They know I tell their story all over the place. But they came in and the father saw him and then the mother walked up and she looked at him and she literally turned around, hit her knees, wrapped her arms around my knees and just wailed, thank you for letting me see my baby. And was just, I can't explain to you, how that made you feel. That's all she wanted to do was be able to see him and know that really was him and, that he was gone. And so ultimately they did end up closing the casket. Like I said, knowing what I know now, I believe we could have had an open casket all day, but he was identifiable for them, for her to see him that one last time when she was told that she never could. And, and so I just think that there's different stories like that's my passion story on now why I do this so often, why I teach this to other people now. But since then, I've done decapitations where, we use a wooden dowel and some screws from your local, hardware store. Plaster of Paris strips that may be used, which are pretty neat, like casting strips that you can get from, Michael's or Hobby Lobby. Those are pretty neat things. Like you said, some screening. Screening is good for a base for any type of wax
Yeah.
work. I've even went as far not to use wax, but to use modeling clay. In some situations that we've used modeling clay because it's got a firmer base to it. And so there's been some instances where I just needed a firmer base in a certain area. So we've definitely done that. Drills, some of the most things that you wouldn't think of, wiring, using certain types of wiring.
Yeah.
And like you said, plaster of Paris. So I think there's plenty of different things that you can pull, but I think it's important, especially for the public, to know. And I teach these in my seminars, even to professionals. We don't use trash. It's very important that we're not using trash. We're not using newspapers. We're not using old bed sheets. We're not using old embalming bottles and plastic and stuff of that nature. And so I always think that's very important that people understand is there's a line. Sometimes we have to use things that maybe are a little unorthodox from what we would consider as far
Yeah.
as like tape goes, and stuff of that nature. Sometimes we're buying tape from a hardware store because we need a certain type of tape to really hold things together for us, but we're not using trash. And I think the deceased still deserves the dignity of not pulling trash out of a trash can to use for restoration. But
Yeah.
to purchase items from a hardware store or a funeral merchandise store to get the items that we need.
Yeah. Buying new things. So,
Right.
hey guys, I'm Kari the Mortician, and this is Michelle Johnston down in Texas, so this is not legal. What you have is not legal in Michigan. So, a central
Oh,
embalming location we cannot do. A trade embalmer has to travel between funeral homes here in Michigan. So, she has a central embalming location. Other funeral homes hire her to bring the deceased to her location to embalm, to do advanced restorative work. And so she does high volumes of embalming. And so her expertise is way above, which you're going to argue with me. But I think repetition builds experience. And if you're only embalming 30, 40 bodies a year in a small town, you can't get as much,
right.
which no knock on small town, funeral directors, but there is something to be said about that high volume of repetition that you're going to get exposure to more and get, little skills here or there that are not found when you don't have that high repetition. I'm so not trying to knock on anybody. I hope I'm not.
Right.
Um, let me see here. Shout out to Bri123 if you pronounce it that way. You asked for a shout out. Our death records public info. So in Michigan, it is a public record. Anybody can go get one with the name and date of death. Is it public down there in Texas?
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Every state is not that way. So I will tell you, it depends on the state you're in. Find out, just go to the county clerk of the county that they died in. It's going to say right there if you can order one or not. If you look up death certificate and whatever county, it'll tell you if you can get one or not. Oh man, looking through the questions. Hello, Joelle, who is watching us. Have you met Joelle
I don't think so. Have
Maldonado, the grave woman?
Oh, yes. So I've taken one of her
Yes.
classes.
Yes. I love Joelle so much. Hey, Natalie Cassidy. So, do you enjoy the front of the house, kind of the arranging side, or are you just so impassioned by the back of the house, prep room, or do you like a little mix of both?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't enjoy the front of the house near like I do the back of the house. So,
Yeah.
I can do it. I will do it. I don't think I'm bad at it, but just like we just said on the embalming side, that's my strong suit. That's where my repetition, my entire career, I've been in high volume commercial embalming establishments. And so that's where my strong suit is. So I can get in front of a family and wait on a family and I can do it, but there's people who've been doing that for repetition and repetition for many, many years that are much better at it than I am. And so I don't enjoy it as much. And I also don't enjoy it as much because I get emotional with people. So the story I just told you a second ago about that family, I will tell you the very next day I quit my job. The very next day, I gave my resignation, and I was like, I can't work for a place like this. I just can't do it because you weren't willing to let me put in a little bit of extra work to get that final result that we got of her being able to see her loved one. And so I ended up quitting. And really, after that, I was like, maybe it's not a good idea for me to wait on families as much because I'm much more valuable in the back. And so, like I said, no, if my honest truth is no, I don't enjoy it as much as I do being on the back end taking care of the actual deceased.
Oh. I love all the trolley trolls. Like, hey, I wore makeup, yeah, because I wanted to look nice. But you know how many videos I do with no makeup on? So if I wanted to hide something, I'd use filters, and I don't. So I am 45, not 50. Thank you. Um, let's talk. Does embalming actually work? This question, I love this. Does it actually do anything? Is it forever? Are they supposed to look great forever, Michelle?
Yeah. No, it doesn't last forever. It doesn't last forever. I do have a coffee mug though that says everything, nothing lasts except my embalmings. So I don't know, but I just like to plug that. But no, realistically, embalming's not meant to be long, forever. Actually, on our case reports after embalming, the last line on all of it always says temporary preserved human remains, because reality is that they are temporarily preserved. I would say, depending on your embalmer and how well a body is embalmed, I have had to keep decedents here for several months while we were waiting to go, to a different country or waiting even to be buried in some of the VA cemeteries. So it's definitely possible with good embalming, good preservation throughout, to stay out several months. But in reality, to pull someone from 3-4 years ago that's been buried, no, they're not going to be in pristine condition anymore, and they're not supposed to. It's supposed to be disinfection and temporary preservation for your loved one.
And yeah, there are those cases like the Big Bopper everyone wants to talk about where they did disinter them and they did look great.
Right.
But it's the exception, not the rule.
Right.
And, we don't know what's going on below the ground.
Right.
If I bury, I meet like 150 families a year or something. So if I was to go disinter 150 bodies, I would get a better idea of what all of them look like and a better ratio, but we don't disinter enough to be able to see what people look like after different periods of time having been involved and buried. So there's no real idea what number might still look okay or
Right.
if they're going to be just completely decomposed. So
Right.
it's very
well, and that goes the same for actual embalming. Just like somebody asked a little while ago, the situation matters too. Did that person have any edema? Did we use specialty fluids on a person versus not?
right. Yep.
All of that matters. And so for a temporary purpose, it matters, and it matters for a long-term purpose too.
The Grave Woman says, I didn't know that. Do you know why it's illegal? I think you're talking about the central embalming. So in Michigan, we have a monopoly law as well. So you cannot own a crematory, cemetery, or funeral home in any conjunction with each other because they don't want anybody to monopolize. Same with the central embalming. I think that might be along the lines of why they want that. They want everyone to kind of have a fair advantage of choosing a cemetery because it's not connected to a funeral home or choosing a crematory because it's not owned by the funeral home and things like that. So I think maybe that's along the same lines of that. What famous celebrity funeral would you like to have observed the funeral director's way of caring for them, or like the embalming or body work on anybody?
Oh man, I'm not sure. I've never really thought about that. I don't know. I guess maybe, somebody asked me about like JFK's funeral. And it was Todd Hara. I was at a convention and he was kind of going over some of those things about how he was killed. And they were kind of asking me, hey, back then, what kind of restorative work do you think happened to repair, the bone structure and stuff like that? So then I kind of started digging into it. So I think that would have been neat, is to actually be a part of that and see how all of that was played out and how they, repaired him for viewing and carried that funeral out. But in the sense of a celebrity, I don't know. I don't really follow celebrities. What about you, Carrie? What's yours?
I feel like I've been asked this and I've come up with ideas over the years, but some of it's like, oh, I kind of just want to see that they were really dead, like people that they question, like the Elvis thing and everything. Like,
Hmm.
I would like to be able to be like, yeah, this was him, or yeah, that was a like fake Elvis, or
Right.
I think seeing some large funerals, the behind the scene of how they do play out, I think would be fascinating, like with JFK's or any,
Right.
celebrity to that grand level, the Queen, things like that. I would love to see how many people are behind the scenes in
Yeah.
action for this and who's really pushing the buttons.
Right.
Because it's not the family at that point, I think, because when you get if I'm accurate, and I could be totally wrong, what I've always learned, and I need Todd to come on here and educate us
Yeah.
on some of this stuff. But that like when you do become president, that you have to have a plan in place. And so
Hmm.
that way everything's in place. So it's not like the wife, the first lady has to sit down that day.
Right.
Jackie O didn't sit down and have to plan a funeral.
Right.
Bam, it was already happening before because that plan has already been run
In
through and
place.
scenarios run through way before. So I would love to just be a fly on the wall, watching it all happen and seeing like who's doing what and who this embalmer is that they bring in to do this care. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I would never stop shaking.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I will say that. Now, whenever like the Queen had passed away,
Yeah.
it was just a big thing here in East Texas because we're small, so some of my customers, funeral directors, everybody was like, well, did England call? Are you going to embalm the Queen of
I know,
England?
right?
Like it kind of became a fun little thing. But I was just like, in a situation like that, obviously I'm not going to embalm the Queen of England, but somebody around this area that maybe was big and prominent, and you just think about, you're like, what if you did get called to do that? I
Right.
don't. Ah, I've done it a million times, but I'm sure you're not in there by yourself. I would only assume that on a celebrity or something like that, there's got to be, so many people in there in the sense of security, making sure things are done properly, and I don't know. So I just
Non-disclosures that you're signing. I like
absolutely,
cell phones are taken, cameras are shut, like everything is on lockdown,
yeah,
because you don't want pictures getting, people taking pictures and them getting out, or
yes,
anything happening in terms of that. Because, and then I also think, well, you're also serving other families at the same time. So how do you like coordinate? Just a lot of coordination, a lot of things going. But yeah, I can't imagine like Marilyn Monroe being in front of me and me being like,
yeah.
oh
Ah,
my gosh, like, if I mess this up, like, the world will see kind of thing.
the world will see. Yes.
Oh, yeah, a lot
Did
of
you see
pressure.
pictures of the Pope embalmed though?
Yes.
Yeah. See, I was bummed out on that one. I was like, come on, guys, somebody should have brought the Pope over here to Michelle Johnston because
You're like, "Send up the Michelle signal, like the bat
uh,
signal, but
yeah.
Michelle."
I was bummed out about the Pope. I was like, come on, guys, his fingernails are still dark. Somebody needs some dye. Somebody call Pierce or Dodge. We need some dye.
Do morticians wash and bodies to prepare them? We do. We wash, we sanitize. Some funeral homes even wash every single individual that's going for cremation. It's just part of their standard of care. So,
Yes.
definitely a lot of washing. Had Joelle asked, "What are your thoughts on extreme embalming? Are you itching to try it? Do you
Yeah.
think there's too much of a liability? Like, what do you
Yeah.
think about that? Really?"
No, I'm totally itching to try it. I would love it if somebody would give me the opportunity to try it. I did have last year somebody call and ask if I would be willing to try to do that for this boy, and they wanted him to be like posing to be throwing a basketball in,
Oh.
and then they were gonna have a basketball goal in there, and I was like, sign me up. I'm doing it. I will come to you. Like, absolutely, I want to try it. But at the end of the day, the funeral home liability legalities, they shut it down before it went through. So I was kind of bummed out. But yes, I absolutely would love to try it. But furthermore, I would even love to be a fly on a wall or to go and watch somebody who does do that often. I know there's different embalmers that's their specialty, and so
Yeah.
they do those. And I don't know who any of those people are, but if I ever find one,
Puerto Rico is seems to be the place to go for it. And I don't know
place to
why
go.
Puerto Rico, but that's where a lot of them that you see are at, is in Puerto
Yeah.
Rico.
Well,
So I don't know.
sign me up. If somebody wants to start teaching extreme embalming, I'm taking the class.
I'm just
I want
there's
to
got to
come.
be a lot of wires and duct tape and zip ties and PVC
Absolutely.
there's
PVC pipe.
something. There's got to be something going on there.
I would say it has to be PVC pipe. I think I really want to know if they are embalmed. Like, are we getting in that position first before injection, or are we injecting lightly and then putting them in? I don't know. Are we breaking bones? That's where I don't know where the line is, because I don't know how it's happening. In some of those positions, you're just like, I know that physically that wasn't possible to do if you embalmed them laying down. You were
Yeah.
never going to get them in that sitting position on the motorcycle or something. So that makes me think either we're embalming them in that position already, which is awesome, but probably messy, right? Or there has to be some unorthodox things happening on the back end, that I'm assuming, families are agreeing to. If they want that, then I'm assuming they must be agreeing to extraordinary measures to make that happen. So, yeah, I would love to be a fly on the wall.
My guess is that they embalm lightly and that they're not kept for long, because they have to be in that position, but then they have to also go in a casket or coffin to be buried. So they have to go from that positioning to standard arms down, legs down, laying down to be buried. So they have to be super pliable. And glutaraldehyde, you're softer for longer, but then you firm up. I'm like, so there's got to be either a different type of fluid they're using, or they have found a mix where they can get the preservation without the rigidity.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the only way, or it's quick. We're not waiting around a week for this. Or maybe they're smelly. I don't know.
We'll have to see that. Now, I did do a child one time, which is not extreme by any means, but I did a child laid to the side with their hand and then their thumb in their mouth, and sucking their thumb. And I did it that way, though, because that's what mom asked us, said that baby always, had their thumb in their mouth. And so that's what she asked us to do. And it was a little bit of, moving things around to be able to get the hand to stay up in the mouth and not like it was resting on the face or something. So, it took positioning it in that certain area, keeping it in that certain area, and letting it firm up in that area in order for it to stay that way. And it worked, and it was beautiful, and the family loved it. However, it was set like that, right? There was no bringing it back down or anything like that. So, yeah, so that would have to be different.
A couple last, because we're gonna let Michelle get back to embalming. She's got to go back to work. It's a busy day in her world there. Can it be a risk on your health from years of embalming? Are you concerned about the long-term exposure and being around it?
I'm not concerned with it. No, I believe that's why we have PPE, which is personal protection equipment. We have respirators. So no, I'm not concerned with it in that sense. I think that if you're not wearing everything that you should be wearing, that you can be exposed to different things, and that long term you may have some health issues, but I'm not concerned with it because we do wear the equipment that we're supposed to wear and respirators when needed.
I don't want to skip anybody's questions. I'm hoping I'm not. You do not have to be embalmed. It's not a law anywhere, but a funeral home may require it. A lot of you kind of asking that again. No, burial vaults are not 100% protective, but one that has a seal and a liner and spray coating is as close to moisture protection as you're going to get. But nothing is ever purported as 100% insured. No moisture is ever getting in. You guys ask great questions. What if someone asked you to have their eyes open? Has anybody ever asked you that?
No, and if they did, it's not realistic. Eyes definitely can deflate after death. And so, in my opinion, it wouldn't be a realistic thing to keep the eyes open. And at the very least, even if you kept them from deflating by using tissue builder or something of that nature, they would lose that gloss to them, right? The what do we call that, Kari? It's got a word for it, but
Luster? I don't know that that's
luster.
the word.
But the gloss that the what looks
Yeah.
natural to you and I in death, that's definitely not going to be there anymore. It's going to be cloudy. Most likely they're going to deflate some, and so no, it's never been asked. And if it was, I don't think I would agree to do it because it's not
Kind of
the
nail polish, like clear polish, would
yeah
give you the sheen. Sheen.
sheen
Sheen is
sheen. Yeah, sheen's a good
a
idea.
good word. Um, Last question for you and me both. Why did you choose this career?
Um, I wanted to be a medical examiner, and I realized how much schooling that was. So I switched over into the funeral career. But to be honest with you, I enjoy being able to take care of the deceased, and I think that's just my passion side of it is really taking care of the deceased, and ultimately that takes care of the living who are still here, learning how to cope and grieve, and so it's important to me to be able to do that. But backstory, little quick excerpt to that. I got caught crashing funerals when I was in high school. Um, so I was 16 and I was a waitress in like the local funeral home down the street. I would go like to all these visitations because I wanted to see the deceased. I don't know why that was a thing, but I would like sign the book and everything, right? And just walk through this visitation line and then leave. And finally, the owner of this small town funeral home one day, he was like, "Hey, who are you? Why do you keep coming to all of these visitations?" And I was like, I'm just really interested in funeral service and I don't know anybody in it. And so I've just been like showing up to these things. And he was like, "Stop doing that. Stop signing the book. Stop coming and signing the book of all these people that you don't know." Oh, it's hilarious. So yeah, that's my backstory. So I don't know. I think I was interested in it at a very young age and then just got more curious
Oh,
and fell right into it. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
poor
even
guy.
want to talk after that. That's
I know. It's hilarious. I know. I know. Several years later, he hired me to work at his firm and he was like, "You're the one that was coming in to the funerals." I'm like, "Yeah, that was me."
the fact you signed the book is what's kept like going, not, like, okay. But the fact you signed the book, like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
here for you guys. I'm
Yeah.
here.
I'm 16, so my brain just decided that that was the thing to do to stay under the radar is just go in and sign the book
Did
and
you
go through
sign
the
your
line.
actual name or did you
Yeah,
like
all the time,
make up
always.
like a faux personality?
Nope, I always signed my own name. I was in it, man. I was full send. And actually sometimes I would randomly get questioned, right? Somebody would like shake my hand and say, "Who are you?" And I was a waitress though at the local steakhouse. So I used to just say, "Oh, I met him, through the steakhouse." And of course they would be always like, "Oh, he loved the steakhouse." Yeah, I bet he did. I'm just here because I wanted to come see this funeral. So yeah,
How cliche that you worked at a steakhouse in
yeah.
Texas in
Mhm.
high school.
In high school. Yeah, yeah. Isn't that a thing?
I love it. Oh my God, I love it. Yeah, mine is not as wildly exciting. I mean, I worked at the funeral home in high school because my mom worked at the funeral home. She was an aftercare coordinator and like met all the families and was like, "Do you need a job? You're 16." So I worked visitations and covered phones until 9 o'clock at night because that was the pager era.
Yeah,
And so funeral directors needed lives. And so they would go do their thing. And when they got home at night at 9, they would take the phones over for the night. And so
right.
did that through high school and went off to college. I was going to go be an epidemiologist because I thought epidemics were wildly fascinating. And then I learned it was all numbers.
Yeah,
Like it wasn't like the movie Outbreak where I'm running around in a large yellow suit chasing
yeah,
rabid monkeys or anything. No.
yeah.
So that quickly went to the wayside. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology and totally love which I still love. I think funerals are a social experiment. kind of
Right.
on their own. So it's fascinating to just watch how people move and interact and stuff. But so my mom was like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want going to college. Like it's not where I thrive is sitting in a class. I am
Right.
too hyper like ADD brained." And so she said, "Well, what about being a funeral director? You love working at the funeral home. You're super comfortable." And I was like, "Huh." So I tried my apprenticeship, and like 2 weeks in, I'm standing at the casket with a mom putting a ring on her daughter's finger who was 7, and I was just like I felt like I was at home, and that's the
Mhm.
best way to like, this I'd found something I needed to be doing because I felt so right about the moment, and,
Right.
yeah, it was great, and then what's crazy is so that little girl's name now, 22, 4 or 5 years later, I just had a girl died of some of the same heart condition complications with a
Mm.
failed heart transplant, same name that I
Oh,
just cared
wow.
for. So it was like this weird full circle, hit me a little more emotional than I would have ever imagined, but it was kind of nice to go revisit that beginning in memories and like thinking about it. So yeah, I started just because it felt right to me, and I felt like I was doing something good. It wasn't a calling, like a lot of people say. I think you find good places for yourself, and then I'm totally fascinated by the social side or the people side, but I
Right.
love and I'm fascinated by bodies and what happens with bodies. And like, if you've never seen inside a human body, it's the most unbelievable thing that, like, 2 days before, that person was up, moving, thinking, feeling,
Yeah.
emotions, thoughts, words coming out of their mouth, everything working in succession, and now it's
Yes.
just all these parts and pieces. It's mind-blowing to step
Yes.
back and think about, and so I love that. I love kind of the reality check once in a while by
Yeah.
experiencing that, I think, too. So, yeah, so good. Well, thank you for joining me. This has been
Of
awesome.
course.
We're
Yeah.
a few
Thank
minutes
you.
over. Yeah.
All right.
So this is Michelle Johnston. Go follow. Where can we find you on social media and things you post? And
Yes, absolutely. So, our I've got multiple business pages, but it's Johnston Embalming and Reconstructive Institute. That's on Facebook. Is our Facebook page. Instagram is Johnston Institute underscore Jerry Jeri. And then, of course, East Texas Mortuary Service has a Facebook group as well as ETX Mortuary on Instagram. And then me personally is listed as Michelle Johnston on Facebook as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate you letting me come on here today.
oh, it's a long time coming. I'm so excited to have you. And everybody likes to hear, not everybody, but when people join, they love the embalming side because you can learn a little more. Someone asked earlier, is it really frustrating, or how do you feel about consumers and kind of viewers not knowing things? And that's why I think we do speak and we do try to post. We don't want to shock value. We don't want to misinform you, but we want educated people making educated choices when it comes to their loved ones, and knowing, like Michelle said, that you can have someone coming in to do restorative work that maybe the funeral director in front of you doesn't have the repetitive skill-based knowledge. So maybe they call someone in to assist them or take over, or can just call to get some consultation. And that's why people like Michelle exist and specialize
Yep.
in it, because it's needed in some cases, not every case, obviously, but in some
Right.
cases. So it's good to have to know people. So call Michelle if you need help with
Yes.
anything, or have your funeral director call Michelle. Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a good night.
Yeah. Good luck. Hopefully you're not there too late.
Oh, what time is it? Yeah. Hey, maybe
Bye, Michelle.